The 12 More Suits for Life collection is a collection of suits we made for Jordan Peterson to reflect the chapters of his book, 12 More Rules for Life. Now, originally, the 12 Rules for Life, we made a rule for each of the 12 chapters, and we called it the 12 More Suits for Life. And it was a fun collection that featured a lot of very viral suits at this point. One of the things Jordan Peterson really needed were some suits and jackets that were useful for podcasts and sort of everyday engagements rather than stage speaking. So we weren't quite as aggressive with regards to the creative design. We went for a more sartorial, professorial, and gentlemanly look, something more of a James Bond theme. However, in order to balance the abstemious nature of this collection with regards to creativity, we added an element of creativity by having a custom operetta sung for each of the suits, and then we put a QR code in each suit. If you scan it with your phone, you'll see that there's a song about each custom suit, sung by Mario Rojas, the Mexican tenor. So I hope you enjoy the 12 More Suits for Life collection we're going to present for Dr. Jordan Peterson. The first suit is from the rule, do not denigrate social institutions. One of the messages that Jordan Peterson talks about is the message of respecting the things that are built before you. And so what we did with the suit in order to symbolize what happens when you try to denigrate the current institutions is new institutions arise that are even better. You see it in North America, some of the great schools have been infiltrated by this horrific communist mind virus. And so what Jordan Peterson did is they started the Peterson Academy. And so the first suit is reflective of that rule by the virtue that we put the first released courses from the Peterson Academy right into the lining of the suit to demonstrate what happens when the institutions fail. The rule that we're trying to capture here from Jordan Peterson's 12 More Suits for Life is aim single-mindedly at the thing that you want. I thought it was a really good way to pay homage to Jordan Peterson's friend, Greg Hurwitz. One of the things that Greg does is he writes this incredible book series called Orphan X. The story that goes with this, and I told this to Greg, is I was at his house and he's got this piece of paper. It's an email from Jordan Peterson, and it's a piece of advice. And the advice is, be the person doing the work, not merely the person who is seen doing the work. It was inspirational enough for Greg to put that out. And I thought that's another way of single-mindedly aiming at the purpose rather than, trying to show your sanctimony. It's about actually getting the work done. So with that in mind, we made the suit itself themed after Orphan X. It's a guy that was a trained assassin for some secret government program that disappears into the shadows, But I wanted that sort of olive theme to sort of reflect that sort of a militant appeal. And then we have the Orphan X book series actually printed inside the suit's lining to highlight that single-minded purpose of aiming for the thing that you want. The suit that reflects the rule, do not hide unwanted things in the fog, was quite well illustrated, in my opinion, with the story of Cain and Abel, who, of course, when God confronts Cain and says, where's your brother? And he says, I am not my brother's keeper. And that's also an allegory that is used in the book itself. And so we wanted a suit that reflected do not hide unwanted things in the fog. So number one, we put the Cain and Abel imagery inside the suit. And number two, we use the fall flannel, because when I think of fog, I think, the season of autumn is sort of, to me, congruent with fog. And so we made a suit that's an autumn suit that has a kind of a foggy demeanor to it in itself, because it is the coloration and obviously the sort of flannel finish. So the suit that this rule represents is notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. There are some stories Jordan Peterson uses in this chapter. One is the famous story of Socrates, who was forced to drink poison for basically telling the truth, and talk about the ultimate culmination of people not being willing to take responsibility for the truth. They'll kill you if you tell the truth. That's a very Soviet thing. So we have a little bit of that Soviet imagery in there. But we also have some Norse mythology in the suit. One of the things I like about using Norse mythology in art is that it's quite cool when it's drawn out, and it's all very grandiose, and it makes for beautiful art. The rule, do not do what you hate, is such an important rule. If you want to succeed in your career, you have to think about being in the top 25% of that career at least. Doing what you hate is a really difficult way to survive because you're competing against people that might like the thing they're doing that you hate to do, and they're generally going to be better at it because they're more passionate and engaged in it because they actually like it. The stories that the chapter brought out were stories of communism and how a lot of times the people that were the best at what they did in the communist regimes, they were taking out of their roles because they were seen as a threat. And so what you get eventually are people that run institutions who are really bad at running those institutions. One example being, when the communists communized the farmland, they didn't even know how to move the food from point A to point B because all the people that were good at it were replaced with people that weren't good at it. All the food ended up rotting, people died. And so there's a lot of strong communist imagery in the suit, which was really fun to make, but of course at the same time a little ominous, a little bit dark. One of the rules in the 12 More Suits for Life is to abandon ideology. It reminded me of reading some of George Orwell's work, in this case, particularly Animal Farm. And in the story of Animal Farm, you have these animals that overthrow the humans because they think that they can do things better than the humans can. Of course, it's a metaphor for the communist revolution in Russia in 1919. And the animals eventually create a set of rules that they themselves try to massage into breaking. So the typical outcome, of course, of a communist revolution is that ultimately things get much worse for everybody, despite the promise of things getting better for everybody. So first of all, the suit itself is sort of like got this bloodshot red cross pattern in it on a dark gray. It's a fairly ominous pattern. It's a very serious pattern. It's also professorial because it does have a flannel finish to it. And then inside the lining, one of my favorite things we did, there's a picture of a bunch of pigs and they're eating caviar, right? Again, showing the sort of high class. It reminds me of the story of the St. Petersburg invasion, during World War II, where you had mass starvation across the city because the communist government actually locked the city down to keep people from escaping. It also stopped the supply lines coming in. However, the communist bureaucrats, the top people in the party, were known to have massive feasts with caviar and steak. So it's an homage to that example. And then, of course, you open the lining and it says 4 legs good. And on the other side, it says 2 legs bad. And this is, of course, from George Orwell. They created a class that the pigs were good and the humans were bad. Some of the noted scholars that Jordan Peterson names throughout the book are Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche. And so we wanted to capture that in a suit. And of course, when you're dealing with the psychologists, I wanted to put something enigmatic. And so the suit itself has this enigmatic multicolored stripe, which I really wanted to do. We actually did 2 suits like that for this collection. And a couple of his suits from the past had a really nice enigmatic stripe to them. So I wanted to recreate that. And then we put a picture of Jung and Nietzsche in the suit, but with a little spin. Each is wearing clown makeup. And the reason we did that is because there's a certain principle that even when you have leadership and mentorship that you aspire up to, you don't want to idolize them. They still have flaws. They're still humans. And so we wanted to capture that. There's also the story of some Greek empire thing where one day a year everybody would make fun of the leaders, and it's such an important thing to have that kind of discourse in society. So we wanted to capture the essence of it is perfectly okay to see the flaws in your leadership. And so we captured Jung and Nietzsche in ways they've never been captured before. So one of the rules for the 12 More Rules for Life is try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. So one of the stories Jordan Peterson told me one time is that they had pet iguanas at home. And it was really interesting is the way that the iguanas died. They die in a very Shakespearean fashion. I thought was pretty funny because Jordan Peterson is known to collect some Soviet art. It's kind of an ironic thing because, you have this incredible suffering, but you have beauty in spite of it. And that's kind of what Soviet art represents. The iguanas, they don't know that the Soviet art is just there sort of facetiously. To them, this is the real thing, right? So when you put an iguana into a room with Soviet art, naturally the iguana is going to become brainwashed with Soviet propaganda. So what you have is a communist iguana living in your house. So the imagery used for the suit are iguanas wearing these sort of commie uniforms because these are communist iguanas. So guys, if you have an iguana at home, remember, it doesn't know irony. It just takes things for what it is. Rule number 9 is if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. So we needed a suit that reflected the theme of writing down your old memories, because when you're writing, effectively you are thinking. So if old memories upset you, it makes sense that writing them out would help you resolve those memories. And so the suit itself looks like paper you would see in a diary. So if you turn the suit horizontally, it looks like a writing pad. And inside the suit, we paid homage to Essay, which is an app that helps you structure writing better. And so it was a nice personal touch. One of the suits for the Jordan Peterson 12 More Suits for Life, which says that you have to plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. A story that is used in this chapter is a biblical story of Jonah and the whale. The suit itself we designed is actually a whale, and so the mouth opens up like on the lapels, and then that whale is eating Jordan Peterson. So that's a Jonah and the whale suit. Our goal was not to be exuberant in this collection, but then we did have one jacket that sort of breaks that rule and goes right for it. It'll be a stage jacket per the Jonah and the whale story, right? Don't give up your faith, guys. Maintain the romance in your relationships. They're intertwined. So Jordan Peterson, going back to his Alberta upbringing, wanted something of a Western suit. And so we rolled this Western suit into the 12 More Suits for Life collection for the rule of not becoming resentful. Once you become resentful, you sit at home for a while, you start hating things. Next thing you know, your pager rings and boom, you blow up. You don't want to be that guy, okay? So the suit recalls on a famous Western country music icon, Hank Williams. And so we wanted a Western themed suit. It's got a bootleg cut. It's got what's called an action shoulder there. And the interesting connection here is Hank Williams himself had a tailor. The tailor's name was Nudie Cohen, who was a very famous tailor who was servicing a lot of the top musical people at the time. I felt like as I was researching the suit, I sort of evoked the soul of Nudie Cohen to put together a Hank Williams suit. And on the side, on the sleeve of the suit, is a couple of notes. And those particular notes play "O Canada." One of the rules for Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules for Life is be grateful in spite of your suffering. You don't really meet a lot of people who are pissed off at life who are also grateful. So if you guys don't know this, one of Jordan Peterson's favorite musicians is Tom Waits. And Tom Waits, he sings on a sangria of different topics, let's say, but one of the underlying themes to his music is in fact to be grateful in spite of suffering, because a lot of his songs are very hard and they really hit on that suffering genre. So I wanted to make a suit that represents gratitude, which is highlighted by the derivative colors of yellow. And then of course we put Tom Waits imagery into the suit, but very avant-garde Tom Waits imagery. We wanted to, again, include a little bit of gratitude in the suffering and the labor of things.